I'd like to give a shout out to our newest sponsor, Fog King Sanitizing and Disinfecting. Do you have a positive COVID-19 case at your workplace or residence? Need some cleaners to come in and blast the shit out of their area? These are the guys to do it. So go to fogkings.ca and get yourself a quote, reach out, and they'll be back to you in no time. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank my sponsor, Rykor Countertops. They deal in custom countertops in quartz, corian, magonite, laminate, and butcher block. They also have custom kitchen cabinetry, closets, laundry rooms, and millwork. They're family owned and operated for 18 years, knowledgeable and highly experienced staff, and friendly customer service. Head on over to 1069 Clark Road. Check out their showroom today. Ortega fight and Max Holloway. Dr. Faisal, a good friend of ours he's been on the podcast a bunch of times. We do the charity events with him. He was the one who stopped that fight.
Wow.
Like he was the cage side doctor for it. And I texted him during the UFC because we were watching the fight on TV.
Yeah.
And then I saw him on camera, and so I texted him. I go, my king. That's what we refer to him as. I go, my king. How bad was his eye? Because that's like his eye got all swollen up, and they stopped the fight. I go, how bad was his eye? And he texts back a little while later, and he's like, it wasn't his eye that I was worried about. It was his head. And he was like mad. He was like fucking mad. He was swearing. He's like, who was his coach? Renner Gracie, maybe?
Not sure.
Yeah, and he was like, fuck that guy, what a piece of shit. He should have stopped the fight. He's supposed to care about his fighters. And he said what nobody knew was after that fight, you couldn't even get him to sit on a chair properly. He was falling over. They had to send him to the head trauma in Toronto. Like nobody saw that. And he was like, he was just taking too much abuse.
Yeah.
They couldn't put him down. But like, at what point do you say to a guy like, okay, man, like enough is enough? You know, we'll talk about some like head stuff today anyways, which is the reason why we have you on.
All right.
So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, my special guest today, Dylan Nadler. He's the owner of MindLock. Is it just MindLock?
Yeah, MindLock mental training.
MindLock mental training. I met you over the phone. This is our first like face-to-face meeting. I met you over the phone back before December.
It was a while. It was right before you were supposed to have who was it? The Toronto guy who was
Elias.
Yeah. Right so before that.
Elias it was around that time. No, we didn't get to work with each other just yet, but I was very fascinated with what you do. And when I first met you and you kind of explained it to me on the phone, I kind of want you to let's dive into it now because I liked who you were. I liked that you were very professional. You were very smart. You were very confident in everything that you were saying and that you did, and you believed in what you did as a service. So in a nutshell, let's run back. Let's talk about you and say your martial arts history and kind of how we'll break into that on how you got into sports psychology.
Sure, like the origin story.
The origin story, yeah. What's the backstory on Dylan?
So I was born in Vancouver, actually, and then a couple of years later, my parents moved to Richmond Hill. So that's where I grew up. I grew up in Richmond Hill.
Okay.
I went to elementary school there. I ended up going to high school. It's a place called Bill Crothers. It's it's a sports school.
Okay.
In Markham area. But I started doing Taekwondo when I was 5. So my parents put me in, and it was a really recreational club, the same way that I would say like 90% are, if not more, right? The joke is there's as many Taekwondo clubs in the GTA as there are Tim Hortons. Like
I believe it.
Right?
Yeah.
There's a lot. So I went through the belt, white, yellow, whatever. And I really liked it. And for me, you did Taekwondo, so there's two sides of it. There's the traditional side, there's the patterns and, all of that. And then there's the sparring side. The place I was at, it wasn't very high performance geared, right? It was very the other side, very traditional. We did our patterns. It was what it was. But without exaggeration, I think we probably sparred once a year, maybe.
Okay.
And for me, I hated it because I love sparring. Like I didn't know what I was doing, but I just loved to spar. So I'd always ask the master, like, hey, can we spar today? Can we spar today? And then he would always kind of look around and gauge the room and be like, no, we can't. Because the problem when you only let people spar once a year is when you let it happen, it's like letting the dogs out. It was crazy and no one knew what they were doing. So it was like no rules. It was crazy. It was ridiculous. But I still loved it. So I was begging him, like, let me go to a tournament. He's like, okay. They would put up a poster once in a while. So I ended up going to my first tournament, maybe like 9, 10 years old. And I show up and nobody was there, like from my team. there was no master there, no teammates, nothing. It was just me, my parents, and my brother, I guess, who was watching. So what had to happen was my dad ended up sitting in the coach's chair coaching me because I had no coach, and he had his little like recorder, like his little video camera, like between his legs positioned, so he could record me at the same time. And it was a joke because what's he gonna say? He does taekwondo now. He's a black belt, but at that time he hadn't. So he's just saying like faster, 10 second, whatever. So, but I still loved it. Like even though I had a pretty bad experience, I guess, with having no support there, you couldn't take me away from it. I just wanted more and more and more. So eventually, listen, my master at that point did an amazing thing that I don't know if other people would do. He said, listen, what you want, we can't provide at this point. Like you need to go to a place where you'll be supported, where you can train hard, where you can go to tournaments, and like we can't do that for you. So what he did is he was really connected in the area, and he gave me a list of like 10 high-level coaches in like the GTA. And he's like, these are my friends. These are people that I have a good relationship with. Try them all out. Like you have my blessing basically to leave, which is, you know what I mean? Like it was a really cool thing for him to do because I don't think a lot of people do it. So my very first trip was this place called Authentic Taekwondo in Markham. And I show up and I'm sitting there. And at the time I walk in with a broken hand because of the tournament before I broke my hand. I like blocked it. You know, when you block a kick with your open hand, like it's stupid. And it broke. So I'm there with a cast on and I'm getting a vibe for the place. And, you know, I sit down and I meet the person who ended up being my coach for the longest time, Master Farah. So I'm sitting down and he goes through, he asked me, you know, the first thing he asked me, we're sitting in his office. He goes, like, what are your goals? Right? Like, what do you want to do? And I thought about it. And at this time I was grade 7. So I was like, 12 years old, 11 years old. And I go, I just want to be the best version of myself that I could be. I just want to be the best Dylan Nadler I could possibly be. I said, I don't care if that's local level. I don't care if that's provincial champion, national champion, Olympics. I don't care. I just felt like I had so much potential that wasn't being tapped into. That's what bothered me. I felt like, let me just see where this goes. So unlike other people, I didn't really start saying, I want to be a champion or I want to be this or that. I just felt like I had this potential and it was killing me to not see it come to fruition. So I was like, just get me there. And he's like, no problem. So I remember walking into the gym and there was another person there. His name is Master Gafoor, Ali Gafoor. He's the CEO right now of 2020 Armor. Shout out to him. He just created a really cool electronic vest scoring system.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, it's changing the game.
Yeah.
So I remember, and I'm watching the class. I'm with my parents. We're sitting inside. We're in the dojang. And I'm watching the class and he has all of the kids facing the mirror and they're all kind of stepping. And he's saying, okay, I want you to fake and I want you to move and I want you to see what you look like when you're doing these things. So I want you to, for example, like turn your back, throw a kick, and I want you to like watch your body movements. And I want you to see, okay, if you turn your shoulders one way, it's going to make your opponent think that you're going to throw a back kick, for example, just from a little twitch of your shoulder. And you can use that to kind of set something else up. And I was just sitting there and I was like, oh my God, I was blown away. I'm like, wait, there's strategy to this? Like I had never, for me, the moment they say go to the moment they say stop, I'm just kicking. Boom, 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 no strategy, nothing. So for me to sit there and be like, man, like there's a strategy to, like I didn't go anywhere else. I had a whole list. I threw it away. I stayed there. Authentic Taekwondo was my spot. That's where I stayed. So from there, I mean, I was a black belt at the time, 2nd degree black belt too. In terms of my ability to compete at a high level, it's nothing really. I mean, to put into perspective, one of the parents there, it's funny, my dad told me later on, they're in like the parent area watching and one of the parents goes to my dad, he goes, Dylan's black belt? He goes, no. He's not black belt. That's how bad I was compared to, because when you come from a place that doesn't do any sort of high level training or anything, like it's trash, you know? So but on the other side, I don't regret it because I learned so much from the traditional side, the discipline, the self-control, all of those martial arts tenets that you want people to learn from a young age, discipline. Like I really did learn that at this club. So what it lacked in the high performance side, it made up in the traditional gritty, like martial arts side. So I never regret either way, going one way or the other. And from there, we were going to like local tournaments every single month. It would be all over Ontario, like everywhere we'd be driving and we would just fight at local tournaments against the same people and just get experience. And I was doing pretty well. Like I was learning pretty fast. I hadn't won any. I think I came second a couple of times. And I was preparing for the first provincial. So there's a big provincial. It was in Kitchener, actually, at Conestoga College. Yeah. And I showed up and I won. And it was my first like big win as provincials. I remember my parents were like, oh, you're provincial champion. And I'm like, I don't really know what that means, but okay, cool. And then a few months later was nationals. So we fly all the way to Vancouver. And I won nationals too. So in the first, really my first 12 to 15 months of competing at a high level. I was provincial champion, national champion, and that's really where things kicked off. I'm trying to think where to go from here. I mean, from there, same thing. You grow. We had a good group of like young kids. It was me. There were probably like 5, 6 of us around the same age, just training. And we were training at a really, really high level. And we were competing everywhere around the world. So, everywhere from Germany, Netherlands, Barcelona, Dubai. Like from a really, really young age, we were traveling. We were competing.
That's cool.
Yeah, and it just led to a different life. You know what I mean? Where in high school, when everyone's doing one thing, we were doing the other. I mean, we were training 3 times a day in high school. So, we'd wake up. My mom would take me to the club. We train from 7 to 8 in the morning. And then my coach would drive us all to school because we were all at the same age. So he'd drive us all to school after training, and then we come back. So my mom would pick me up from school. We go back, train again 3 to 5. Then we'd have some time off, do our homework, eat a little bit, whatever. And then we train again at night with everybody else from like 7 to 9. So we were training 3 times a day at like 15 years old, like a lot of the time. And that's just what life was. And for us, it was normal. Like I never really knew anything else, cutting a lot of weight. Like it was just a life of discipline that was super unique to that core group and anybody that did that type of thing. But it helped translate into who I became later on because of those things. You know what I mean? Having to carry around like a 4-liter jug of water because I was cutting weight in high school. Like all of these little things that seemed like a nuisance at the time, they build into who you are in terms of the discipline, in terms of the adversity that you face. So, from there, I mean, I ended up, when I look back at my Taekwondo career, I was number 1 in Canada for a long time, top ranked. I was top 40 in the world at one point for my division. And I fought in so many different countries against so many different people. I was the first Canadian, or the only Canadian in a long time to win back-to-back U.S. Open championships. So there's a tournament called the U.S. Open. Yeah, it was sick. It's called the U.S. Open, and it's like the biggest open tournament in maybe the world that you don't have to qualify for. So everybody goes, and I won it back-to-back 2014, 2015, which is like the first time a Canadian did that in a really, really long time. And then, just like some really, really cool stories. I mean, I fought when I was like 16 or 17, I fought against the guy who had just won the Olympics from China. It was 26. He just came off winning the 2016 Olympics. This guy named Shuai Zhao. And he had just won. And then a few months later, I was fighting him. You know what I mean? It's like crazy the way that matches up at a really young age too. And I lost, but I didn't get beat up or anything like that. If anything, I took the fight to him. But you know how Taekwondo works. It's not necessarily about who's more dominant. It's just about how you score the points. Fast. Right? So and that's kind of what lost it for me later on, which is just like, man, I'm such a fighter, but this isn't working for me anymore. Just trying to score the points and whatever. It wasn't working for me the way it used to, because I would do things. I'd fight people like that where I would bring the fight to them. If anything, I would dominate them. Then you look at the scoreboard and you're like, how did this happen? Yeah. So that's what slowly kind of like weaned me off of it. But that's my Taekwondo background and how that kind of manifested. And now I'm a 4th degree black belt, so I'm a master. I was teaching classes for a long time, and I have that under my belt. So it's definitely a pride thing. I think you forget about the traditional side when you really start to compete. It doesn't matter that much. But then when you stop competing, you look back, you're like, you know what, that's cool. Like I'm a master.
You learn that discipline to get you to that next level in a different sense.
Yeah.
I mean, wouldn't want to be the top end level and completely miss the traditional side.
For sure.
So how did the sports psychology stuff come to play with all this stuff? Did that force you to go into that lifestyle of school because of Taekwondo, or fill in the gaps here?
So it's funny. So from a young age, I wanted to be a sports psychologist. Like from a really, really young age. Like if you look at my elementary school yearbook and it says, where do you want to be in 10 years? Like that's what I put. Like when everyone else wanted to be like a doctor, lawyer, musician, like I want to be a sports psychologist, which is weird. It's not a normal thing. I mean, I think when I was really, really little, I wanted to be like an astronaut, right? I wanted to go to space until my parents sat me down to like, listen, like you got to be super sick at science, and only like 1% of astronauts actually go into space. And I was like, no, it's a wrap. Not for me, not for me. And from there, I really just wanted to be, I think I was always in sports, right? Like I said, I started Taekwondo when I was 5. I was playing soccer or whatever. And I always was interested in psychology just because I always wanted to know why. You know what I mean? Like I was one of those annoying kids, like why, you know? And I always was interested in the why, even things like billboards, like why would they choose that font, or why that color, or why that slogan? Like I was interested in behavior. Like how could people change variables and manipulate variables to change people's behavior from like a really, really young age. So that's how the two combined, and I never let it go. And I guess my original intention was, I'll finish my fighting career and then I'll go from there, right? I went to university. I was still fighting in university. I was in psychology. I was at York first for a bit. Now I'm at U Ottawa. I was going to go to the psychology degree and kind of go from there. And then when I stopped fighting in 2017, I was kind of just like, what am I waiting for? You know what I mean? Like I have so much sport experience, but that's not enough. But mixed with my intuition and my love for this thing, I feel like I could do something now, right? Like, of course, there's more to learn in school, but is it something that I can't learn myself, like by doing the research, right? Of course, it's not just something you can just pick up and do. But I figured, like, why am I waiting? Why am I letting someone else tell me when I can do this if I feel like I could? But at the same time, I was willing to accept the fact that maybe I'm not good at this. So I just tried. I was like, you know what? I built this thing. I built this program. I reached out to all of my connections in Taekwondo. I'm like, where do I start? I start with Taekwondo people. So I reached out to all these coaches in the area, people that I knew. And, it was my first experience, I guess, kind of like cold DMing people. And I got a couple of responses from, some really high level instructors that I grew up with too. And like, all right, let's bring you in. Luckily, because I was reaching out to Taekwondo people, I already had that kind of prestige that came with me where people trusted me. They knew who I was. They knew what I was about. And I knew what level I fought at. So I guess they figured, you know what, let's give him a try, because if he can coach these guys half as well as he fights, like, we're going to be okay. So that's where I started. I did like a summer program with these two clubs. It was good. I learned a lot. There were a lot of things that didn't go well. There were a lot of things that did. It was a crazy learning experience. And then from there, I took maybe a few months off just to go back into school. And then I get a message like January. This is like 2018, January. Not a message, a follow from this UFC fighter. And I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. It's not every day you get a follow from a UFC fighter. So I'm like, fuck it. Like I'll just message her. It was my first ever UFC client, Leah Letson.
Okay.
So she follows me and I'm like, okay, cool. Let me send her a message. I wake up. Not only was there no response, but she read it, no response. I'm like, fuck. And I'm like, man, I just took my L. I was like, whatever. But then the day went on and I'm like, why not just try again? You know what I mean? Like, let me send another message. What's the worst that can happen? You know what I mean? She doesn't answer me. Whatever. You know what I mean? Like, it's not that bad. I think that's one thing that you learn from competing too and being under high level pressure situations. You realize like what's really bad and what's not that bad. What really is scary and what's not. I'm like, it's not that scary. I'm not that scared of rejection. Sent her another one. Turns out she was just busy. She's like, oh my God, sorry, I was caught up. Blah, yeah, send me an email.
Which is usually like 95% of the time with people. They're just busy. I've read messages and go, okay, I got to message that guy back later, and then I'll forget.
Yeah, listen, listen, if you're watching this and you do any sort of like cold messaging, anything, persistence. My mentality, at least even now, is until you tell me no, I'll keep messaging you.
See, that's what I liked about you, and that's why I said it kind of you reminded me of Dara, because you were persistent in talking. You had to talk to me about something, and it was like, I need to talk to you. I know that I understand you're busy, but I need to talk to you. And that was what, like, okay, there's some sort of urgency here, because if you didn't give up, we never would have talked. Or same with him. Like, he was very like, hey man, like, you got to be in the people's face.
Yeah,
because if you're not, because they'll forget. Yeah,
there's a line. Like, if someone tells you no, and you keep going, then that's different. Then you're gonna get blocked, and it's gonna be it's bad. It actually hurts your brand. You don't want to be annoying. You know what I mean? But what I found is when you think you're being annoying, you're really not. Sometimes people genuinely just forget. You could send them 5 messages in a row and they answer on the 6th, and you expect them to be mad, and they're like, oh, sorry, man. Thanks for being so persistent. Like you just said. It's like, whoa, interesting. Because I think the way that we grow up, the only thing you compare like cold messaging to is almost like DMing or just DMing like a girl. Yeah. Think about what you learn when you're talking to girls. It's like, oh, you send one message, you get R-bombed, and it's like, oh, I'm not going to talk. You know what I mean? It's like a diss.
Yeah.
And that's the only thing that younger people can relate to, like cold anything. But it's not like that. You know what I mean? You can send 10 messages in a row, and until you tell me no, I'm going to keep going, because either you're busy or I'm going to force you to have the balls to tell me no. I'm okay. If you tell me no problem. I'll end it on a nice note. We'll move on, leave the door open. But until you have the balls to tell me no, I don't want this, let's keep going. Right, so that's my mentality.
Well, they say even in sales, it's not the first call; it's the 6th call.
Yeah,
and you have to be. You got to keep on until they finally say, okay, no, like, beat it. I don't want your product, or I'm not answering. But persistence, man, is true, 100%. It's everything.
So that's what I did. Yeah. So I messaged her. We got together, and I ended up messaging her. I got on the phone with her agent because I guess what I wanted in return, I was going to do it for free. And I was like, maybe you could just post some stuff for me on your page. She's like, okay, well, anything that I do social media related, goes through my agent, blah, blah, blah. So I'm on the phone with an agent. So now not only am I talking to my first ever like UFC fighter, but now I'm on the phone with like an agent, like a sport agent from like a really successful company. It's called Iridium. I just spoke with the CEO, Jason House, like a couple of days ago. I did my own podcast. So it's like, I'm like, okay, the ball is kind of turning, blah, blah, blah. So I ended up working with her for like 6 weeks for free. And I'm okay with that. I'm like, listen, I think I said the same thing to you. I'm like, I believe in this, right? I'm not trying to scam anybody. I'm not trying to like pull a fast one. I'll give you 6 full weeks. And at the end, if you feel like, it's not for me, no problem. I appreciate the fact that you tried. But in my experience.
So dive into exactly what it is that you do.
Okay, cool.
And then we'll come back to her again.
So at MindLock, it's completely sports psychology, nothing else. So there's no other type of coaching in there. It's developing the mental side of sport for high performance athletes.
Okay.
So when I say developing the mental side, we're looking at the pillars that make up the mental game, right? And I think I said this to you at one point too. You look at an athlete, especially a high level athlete, and you ask them, well, how much of performance is broken down into the physical side and the mental side? There's some people that say mental is 99%. Some people say it's 80, whatever. Let's be conservative and say it's 50-50, right? Okay. Super conservative, 50-50, mental, physical. Well, now you have to look at people's habits, right? How much of their behavior goes into the physical side? How much of their training, right? Supplements, nutrition, strength and conditioning coach, technical, sleep, right? All these things are all physical. So now when you look at what people are doing to attack the mental side, not much. Maybe they listen to a podcast. Maybe they have like some quotes on their phone. Book. Yeah, it's not the same at all. It doesn't take the same disciplined approach. It's not consistent. But then you look at it and you say, well, the mental game makes up at least 50% of my performance. And that always blew me away. And that's something that I came to realize through my own experience traveling the world and seeing high-level training programs, seeing Olympians. And I realized like, these are all amazing athletes and they do certain things, but how come there's no like psychological aspect that's so intense that it creates like as much pull as everything else that they're doing, right? Maybe some people talk to someone every once in a while, whatever, but it wasn't the same, right? It wasn't the same as physical. And that always blew me away because for me, I really leaned into the mental side because I mean, look at me. I was never the tallest in my division. I was never the fastest, never really the strongest, but I was tough because I taught myself those things, all the self-talk, all the visualization, right? All of the mental side of competing, I focused on that all the time too. So when I showed up to compete, I was confident, but it was like a true, authentic confidence instead of this facade, right? And the problem is when you try to put your chest out and you kind of pretend and you fake it till you make it type of thing, the moment you get exposed, it's a wrap, right? You lose your confidence as quickly as it comes when it's not authentic.
For sure.
I was able to walk into the ring confident in myself and my abilities, knowing that my goal was just to be the best version of myself, like I said before, right? When your goal is to get a crazy KO, in your head, the moment you realize that it might not happen, starts to kind of take you away from that, right? The moment you realize, oh, I want a first round knockout. Now it's a second round. Now you're already starting to like hesitate too. So my goals were never like that. I'm just going to show up and be the best version of myself. I'm going to fight my best fight every time, whether that's finishes in the first round, goes all 3, doesn't matter. Even if you lose, even if I lose, but I gave my best, I'm okay with that, right? People get outclassed all the time. The worst thing isn't getting outclassed. The worst thing is underperforming. That's the worst feeling. It's not losing. People think, oh, I'm so scared to lose. No, it's losing when you know you shouldn't have. That's what keeps people up at night. Anyone can get outclassed. It is what it is.
I should have beat him. I should have, could have. I should have done this different. I knew better. It's the regret. So when you talk to an athlete, let's say an athlete comes to you and they say, hey, Dylan, I want to work on. Do they come to you with things that they want to work on mentally, or do you diagnose that in a sense where you ask them a million questions and then you say, okay, this is where I think you're lacking and then this is how we advance. So, you have to do self-words of affirmation or something for a month. Like, how does it work when someone comes to see you?
So the program itself is completely online, which is actually good because of how this whole COVID thing went. And because I work primarily like just a lot of international stuff, like a lot of Americans and whatever, it just helps. So we start the call, Skype, FaceTime, whatever. And off the bat, one of the first things I do on the first day is a baseline assessment. So I'll ask them, like you said, all these different questions, measuring from 1 to 10, and I'll kind of measure it at the end, and I'll have.
What kind of questions would you ask?
A question would be, for example, I am able to visualize myself doing an action, right? And you tell me, okay, 1 to 6 or 1 to 10, right? Or another thing could be,
So
I
one
get this,
1 being low, 6 being
yeah,
okay.
1 being really low, 6 being high, or I get unexpected noises distract me, right? Certain things
Squirrel.
like that. Yeah, and they get right, and they get funneled into different categories, right? So there's self-talk, visualization, discipline, self-control, and I basically just tally the numbers. And I say, okay, well, this person is, at 10 here, 8 here, 4 here, blah, 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 blah. It's more detailed than that, but this is like the thing. Yeah. And I'm able to say, okay, well, here you go, right? How do you feel about this, right? This is kind of you on paper. And I really appreciated that. And I do it that way because that's how I would want it. I like seeing the numbers. I like tangible things. I don't really like someone just saying, oh, it sounds like you have confidence issues. I want someone to say, well, based off of these things that you assessed yourself, that's what the numbers are saying. And then we talk about it. So based off of every person's results, they get a completely personalized program for them. So there's not just like a cookie cutter formula that I push everybody through and they learn the same thing. It doesn't work like that. Everybody's personalized because everybody has different strengths and weaknesses, right? One person could be really high level in one thing and low in the other, and then you switch it for different people. It just wouldn't work to push them through the same thing. So based off of that, I have a ton of activities, worksheets, all these different things, and we'll just go every session, whether it's once a week, once every 2 weeks, once a month, whatever it is, we'll just run through it. So we'll have, okay, here's our visualization exercise. Here's our self-talk activity. Here's our goal setting sheet. And the moment we're done, because it's online, I just email it to them right away. So they don't have to write anything down. They don't have to worry about remembering things. They just talk. They talk, I write down, and then I send it off to them. And as we build this relationship, now when problems start to come up, we can talk about it right away because we know each other, right? If they say, man, like this happened in training, I was getting frustrated. Because we've built this relationship over the course of a certain amount of time, it's easier. Whereas a lot of times, because sports psychology is so expensive, it's crazy, it's so expensive, people can really only afford to do it for like a couple sessions before a fight. It's just, I never understood that. It just doesn't make sense. You just can't do that. So for me, it's way cheaper, but it's consistent. That way we've built this relationship so that when the time comes where there is a problem or something that comes up, we're ready to go. Right. And because it's portable, because it's online, you don't have to come to an office. I mean, when people are flying to Fight Island, like I've had, you can just FaceTime me when you get to the room. And it's crazy too. It's really good because now the UFC is making people quarantine, right? For like 24 hours before.
So you got some time to kill.
Now we have even more time to talk. Yeah. So a lot of times where even compared to their opponent's kind of driving themselves crazy. They have nothing to do compared to them who we can get together. We can talk, go over, like give them a couple game plan things like, hey, here's what we should be doing for the next little bit. How are you feeling? Touch base. It's just like, it's completely different.
Are all the athletes that you've worked with the same kind of ticks in their armor when it comes to the psychological game?
No, and that's one thing that caught me off guard, which is how different people's skill sets are. I think from the outside in, because I've always been a fight fan, I was watching the UFC, you think, man, these people are crazy. Like you see how they perform and you're like, they're doing crazy, phenomenal things until you start talking to them and you realize like there's some underlying stuff here, right? The person that you think is a beast and they have confidence issues, right? There's people that just are really negative and they have these negative self-talk statements that take them away. And you're like, how could you think like that? You're so talented. So everybody has their differences and it challenges me to understand how to help all these people too. Because like I said, if it was just a cookie cutter system, I could just kind of like autopilot it and talk to them. But it forces me to be on my game and understand because everybody's completely different, which helps me as a fighter myself, because all I'm doing is having conversations with like the highest level competitors in all of martial arts. So not only am I helping them, but it helps me. It's like getting reps in, right? So it's like this win-win for everybody. But I definitely found right away that people are different. You'll find that people have similar kind of issues that you can put in the same bucket and you can address. And once you kind of find the way to address one person with the same problem, you can address another. But it does take some time to understand, like, where does this come from? Because, what you might tell me is a problem, it might be, it might not. It takes a little bit more diving into it to understand, like, is that really what stems from it or could there be more? So that's the benefit of having a consistent program where we can touch base once a week, twice a week, and actually dive into these real things. And it helps everybody. I mean, like, just the ability to talk to somebody and work things out is huge. And I think the biggest misconception that fighters have is, I'm tough already, right? I get that all the time. I'm already tough. Thanks. It's okay. I don't need it. I'm confident. That's great. You know what I mean? And if you're confident, that means you get to start at a better place than someone else that's not, but it doesn't mean you don't need it. It's like, imagine Floyd Mayweather says, I don't need a boxing coach anymore. I'm good at boxing. You still need it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't need a striking coach. You do. You still need to be, no matter how strong you are at anything, you need to be challenged. You need to be held accountable for those skills as well. You can always learn. You can always develop. Like I said, always be challenged. So people that feel like, well, I'm already mentally tough, that's a great head start, but it's not the answer. Right? The same way you would never tell your coach, well, I don't need to go for a run. I have good cardio. How do you think you maintain good cardio? You have to keep up with your running, with your skipping. You have to keep it up. So if you're naturally mentally talented, you have to keep up with it. And if you're not being challenged, then you're going to get bored. And that's where this comes in. So it's for everybody. Everyone comes in at different levels. There's some people that have a lot of issues. There's some people that have none. But the benefits are always the same, because the ability to talk to somebody on a consistent basis is huge. Even little things, even if something, let's say, bothers you in practice, you get frustrated. A lot of people don't know what to do with that frustration. They go in the car, they turn on their music, they get home, they forget about it. It's going to manifest in other ways, right? Maybe next time you spar that person that frustrated you, you're a little bit more tense and you overcommit and you get caught. Well, if you dealt with that frustration the moment it came up, it wouldn't have happened.
So how would you deal with that kind of frustration? Let's just use that as an example. Like, how if someone called you up and said, hey, Dylan, this week we had pro sparring this week. Wasn't my week. I was, every time I turned around, I was getting cracked. Didn't seem like my head was there. What do you do to start to get these people through that?
Well, like I said, going back to what I said before, but always asking why and being interested in the why, that's where I would start. There's always more. There's always a why. So if they say, well, my head wasn't there. Well, why? Right? How did your day go? Did you get enough sleep? Did you eat that day? Did you get into a fight with your girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever? It starts with the why, right? What led to that? And then, it might not have gone well, but there are practices that don't go well. Why is it bothering you so much, right? A lot of people you'll see, maybe they'll train in another gym and they get nervous when another coach is watching them, right? Because they want to kind of like show off and it doesn't work. Well, the question is, well, why do we care about what they think, right? Why are we putting so much into their hands, right? Like their judgment. Why are we valuing their judgment? So it comes down to all those questions of why, right? So that's what I would start with. I'd say, well, not every practice has to be a good practice. Let's figure out why, right? And sometimes it's ironic. The worst practices are the best ones because you learn from it, right? It's easy to feel good when things are flowing, but are you really learning? Not really. I mean, my coach used to tell me too. He used to say, listen, what he used to compare it to like surfers in the ocean. He's like, when the waves are coming and you can just ride those waves, yeah, you're going to have a great time, but you're not really learning anything. You're not developing. But when there's, a day when the ocean's completely flat and you have to swim and you have to find that one wave and you finally go up and you ride it, that's when you develop the most, right? So yeah, riding the wave is fun, but sometimes when there's nothing there and you have to force yourself to do it and you have a shitty practice, you can learn the most from it. So you can understand it. So one thing I do is I get all my athletes to journal after every practice. Whether it's they train once a day, 3 times a day, doesn't matter. Every single practice, journal. And what's it for? They write down, well, okay, what happened in this training? What did I do?
So if you gave me a journal to do, I wouldn't know what the hell to write. So like if you were to say, okay, I need you to do a journal after every training session, do you give them a list of questions to write down with the journal?
Yeah. So I'll tell them.
How does it work?
So it's pretty simple. It really just is like the 5 W's, right? What did you do? How did it make you feel? And like anything special that came up. So for example, it could be something really small as I showed up, I had a great session. I had a good meal beforehand, gave me good energy, just felt nice and light. Maybe off the top, it doesn't feel like you gained anything from writing in there, but when you extrapolate it and you write it over and over and over again, you'll see patterns, right? Sometimes there's more to write. You say, man, I got cracked. Like you said, I got cracked. I shouldn't have done that. My hand wasn't up. Next time I have to make sure my hand's up because I was really embarrassed. Okay, cool. What you'll find is 2 things happen when you start to journal. So to answer your question of what do you journal, it's really just that. What did I do? How did it make me feel? Were there any things that frustrated me, made me feel really good? Whatever. I do it too. I've been doing this since I was a little kid, like 14, 15. Every single practice, I would write in it. Does 2 things. Number 1, builds awareness, right? It builds the awareness of even understanding what caused me the frustration. Like I said, people finish practice. Most people don't even stretch, let alone journal, right? People want to get in their car and they want to go home. They're like, fuck, I worked hard enough, right? But you forget about those things. People overestimate their memory. Like, I'm going to remember it. No, you're not. You're not. You're going to get in the car. You're going to turn on your song. You're going to go home, shower, cook. Like, you've already forgotten it. So write it when it's fresh, right? So what happens is you build the awareness. You have to understand, wait a second, I did get frustrated today. Or wait a second, I did learn something new. Or wait a second, I did have low energy. Why? So it builds awareness, which a lot of people want to have, but they don't. So that answers the question, well, how do I be more aware? Journal. You have to ask yourself those questions. Number two, it allows you to look at this timeline that you've created for yourself, right? Because let's say you've been journaling every practice for a year. You can flip back through those pages and you can see, wait a second, like that used to really frustrate me, right? I used to get caught all the time. My hands were never up. Now my defense is one of my strongest assets. And you get to look back and be proud of yourself and understand, like, wait a second, I did that. And then when you find yourself facing another problem, you can look back and say, well, I faced problems before. I can get over that, right? I thought my hands being up was the biggest problem and I fixed it. So now I have this new problem. Why can't I fix that, right? And it's consistency, right? I heard this quote a long time ago I really like. It says you have to collect the dots to connect the dots. So every time you write in this journal, you're like collecting these dots. And then you can take a step back and connect them and look for the trends. Okay, you look back at the year, for example. You say, okay, these are my 5 best practices, my 5 worst. What links them, right? Maybe it's a certain meal. Maybe it's a certain amount of sleep. Maybe it's a friend that you spoke to on the phone before.
Maybe it's a toxic girlfriend.
Right?
It could be anything.
It could be anything. But unless you have that information, you can't connect anything. And that's where people lose it. They live their life day by day, which is great. You want to be in the present. But for me, I tell all my athletes, you want to be an athlete, but you have to treat yourself like a scientist, collecting data, gathering data, analyze it. Like you have to do it. And I'm able to tell them this because I did that too. And like I said, that's what made me special. It wasn't my crazy supernatural fighting skills. It was the things that I did behind the scenes that made me special. I knew myself better than anybody. I knew no matter what country I'm in, these are the foods I can find because I know what helps me perform well. This is the music I can listen to because I know how to perform. That's what I did. I knew how to perform. That's really just what high-level sports are. How can you perform? It doesn't matter if you're the best athlete in the world. If you show up and you underperform, that's what people remember you as. It's about performance, and that's why it matters. Can you pull it out? Can you execute? Execution is hard. Practice is easy. Training's easy. Anyone could be a big fish in a small pond. You could be the king of your gym, but if you're getting knocked out every time you step in, or you can't pull a trigger, or you're hesitating, that's your legacy. That's the legacy you leave behind. It's how can you perform? And people lose that. They think, oh, I'm gonna, go to the gym. I'm gonna get my diet right. Those are all amazing things, but at the end of the day, if you can't execute, what are you? And that's one thing that I always prided myself in. I'm a performer. I can perform because I know how. And that's the number one message that I try to push onto my athletes in any way that I can. You have to perform. It's great that you're doing all these things, but the underlying reason that we're doing this in the way that we are is so that when you show up into the ring, you know that not only are you physically prepared and mentally prepared, but it's going to come to fruition and you're going to get the performance that you want. You're going to perform to the best potential that you can, the best possible version of yourself. That's all you can ask for. Right? And, there's other psychologists, and it's true where they say psychology isn't always performing 10 out of 10. It's taking like a 6 out of 10 and squeezing out an 8. It's taking a 4, getting a 6 out of it. It's really just maximizing the most that you can do. And that's what it is. So we work one-on-one. Sometimes I'll do group sessions if it's like a bigger group, like I said, with those Taekwondo kids in the summer. But one-to-one, it'll last like 45 minutes to an hour. We'll go through our thing. Every week is different. Sometimes we just talk and go through certain adversities that came up. I'll email them the results, and then every few months we'll redo the baseline. So now we could see the development, because the difference between mental training and physical training, it's less tangible, right? If I can do 20 push-ups today and 40 push-ups next month, I know I'm getting stronger. But how do you really know if you're being more confident? How do you really know if you're more focused? It's hard. So doing it this way, and, going over this baseline like every few months, it allows them to see, okay, you know what? I am getting better. It's a win-win. It helps me understand what's working and what's not. And it allows them to have more confidence in the program. And they say, you know what? Not only do I feel better, but the results are showing that. And the coaches like to see that. The agents like to see that. So it's a win-win for everybody. Yeah.
I've heard of fighters putting words of affirmation on their mirrors in the morning. Like that's the kind of thing you get into too, right? Just giving these guys different tools, different ways to make themselves more mentally stronger or believing in themselves. Like what other techniques do you use besides a journal?
Yeah, no, self-talk is huge. I mean, this takes me back. So I mentioned before, Master Ghafoor, Ali Ghafoor, the CEO of 2020 Armor. He told us when we were young, before our first nationals, I told you the first nationals that I won in 2012, he told us, I'll go to your mirror and write down, I have the mind of a national champion. And I think I was the only one that did it. Same thing with the journal. Our coach had told us, get a journal. At the time, I was more scared of him asking to see it and me not having it. That was really my motivation to start, you know what I mean? Than actually knowing it. But I was the only one to do it. So same thing with the mirror thing. In my bathroom mirror, I have the mind of a national champion. which sounds cool. But I mean, when you're 12 years old, it's kind of embarrassing. I don't know. Like my brothers are there. Like I have friends that come over. Like you forget like these things that just obviously sound like they help. When you're younger, like it could be embarrassing, but I stuck to it. I did it, and it does work. And that's why a lot of fighters do it. They'll write it. You'll see like they have these big jugs of water. They'll write things on. It's the positive self-talk. I think positivity is hard, right? Negativity is easy. It's really easy to just, have a pessimistic outlook on things, and positivity is hard. So how do you develop that? How do you like flex that muscle? It's through rehearsing these things. So for everybody, it's different, right? Some people like to actually say it out loud. They say, oh, I'm the best. I'm tough. I'm strong. Some people do it in their head. Some people have their coach say it to them. But like you said, it's affirming these things, and you're fueling your head with positivity, right? It's the best way to do it, because that voice in your head, people always neglect it, right? It's that voice when you are in training and you get hit with something, you go, man, like, how did that guy catch me? Like, I'm so shit. Even something is that we think it's normal human behavior, right? It's okay to be down on ourselves, but why? Why do we talk to ourselves that we wouldn't necessarily say to our teammate or our best friend? Right? I would never look at you after you got caught and said, man, you're so shit. You just let that guy catch you. You would never do that, because it's not helpful. It's not conducive to a positive experience. So why do we allow ourselves to talk that way to ourselves? Right? Sometimes you have to ask, like, would I say that to somebody else? Why is it okay if I say that to me? Why can I wake up and say, man, I'm so tired. Like, I don't even want to go to practice. You know what I mean? Like, maybe I'll just stay home. It all counts. So you have to push it out with the positive stuff. It's the only way to do it. And it takes a while. It's probably one of the longest things to develop, the positive self-talk, because you're changing something that's been the same way like your whole life. You've never really been forced to check it. And this is where the awareness comes in, because part one is having the awareness to catch the negativity. Most people don't do that. You have to have the awareness to catch it. Then you have to be able to change it up. So what I do, and this is different than what most people do, is I filter it. So I take a negative statement and I'll find a way to filter it into something positive. So, a common example is people saying, I'm nervous, and you channel it into, I'm excited, right? Because it's the same bodily feeling, right? You have the butterflies, you're sweating a little bit, you're a little anxious. But when you label it as nervous, it's like a negative connotation.
Gotcha.
But when you label those same feelings as excitement, it makes you feel better, right? Another example is like, let's say you're ending a fight camp, you had a tough fight camp, you're walking into the ring, you got some bumps and bruises, right? Sometimes people think, man, like I'm not 100%. Right, my knee is busted up, my shin is swollen. Like, tough fight camp. I wish that I was 100%. It's negative. It's not going to help you in the ring. But if you filter it into something positive and you say, I'm super prepared. I had a great fight camp. These bumps and bruises are indicative of me trying really hard. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to use that preparation to my advantage. We're talking about the same thing, but it's how you look at it. One version looks at it in a negative way. One looks at it in a positive. So I tell my athletes all the time, we're not building force fields. We're building filters, right? We're not trying to plug our ears and say like, I can't hear the negativity, because negativity is always going to come in. But if you've been trying to prepare yourself to never experience negativity or negative self-talk, the moment it seeps in, you're going to get more anxious. You're like, fuck, I'm not
But
supposed
this
to
could
think
work
that way.
not only just for
Anybody.
competition. It can work for just everyday life.
Everyday life, you filter it. So you build a filter where, guess what? Positive self-talk makes you feel good, but negative self-talk does too, because now the negative self-talk gets filtered into positive self-talk, which allows you to feel better. So it's just like the system. Like I said, we're not building force fields, we're building filters. And once you can establish it, like I said, it doesn't matter if you're a fighter, business person, mom, dad, in a relationship, like these are core skills that you can take with you everywhere that you go. And that's what the mental thing is. You can lose your muscle mass over time. You will lose your cardio when you go on vacation. It is what it is. But the mental stuff, those mental skills, they will never leave you. As long as you're consistent with it, you keep up with it. Those are the skills that you never have to worry about losing in your luggage, right? People have their lucky gloves. They have their socks that they put on. But guess what? If you're flying to Barcelona and your luggage gets lost, you're screwed. You're like, all my magic is gone, But when you put that in your head and you build these mental skills,
believe that.
Nobody can take it away from you. You can be just yourself. You can walk into any arena in any city in front of any fan base against any opponent, but you know that what you need is up here. Nobody can take away from it. And that's real confidence. And that's what people need. People need the real, authentic, genuine confidence. And that's how you get it, through doing things like that.
I was going to ask, I think that what you're saying makes complete sense. And I just want to challenge it a little bit, though. Like, isn't there an element of where people are kind of almost putting their heads in the clouds a little bit sometimes? And I don't mean by being positive, but is there no place for negativity? in our lives at all to be like, hey, like I did this terribly, or like just some sort of reflection that just makes you go, okay, like I need to be better. This is not kind of a part of that as well.
Yeah, you know what? That's a great point. And like you said, the reflection piece, right? If you can match it with an element of reflection and awareness, then you can use it to your advantage, right? But a lot of people don't. A lot of people just say, you know what I mean? Like, fuck this. You know, I can't play. I had such a shitty day, you know? Yeah. If you have the ability to use your awareness to reflect on it and say, well, why did that happen? Right? Like I said, I get called all the time. I'm a 4th degree black belt in Taekwondo, but I'm a white belt in Jiu-Jitsu. I get tapped all the time by like anybody. And it is frustrating for me too. I'm like, I can't believe this has happened, but I have to match it. So when I journal, I let the frustration come out. I don't pretend it's not there. Like you said, you have to be real with yourself. Mm-hmm. I'm not pretending it's not there. Oh, today was a great practice. No, that's not how you really do it. Like you said, with your head in the clouds, you know what I mean? You eat shots all day. Great day for me. No, it wasn't a great day. It sucked. But does it suck long term? Mm-hmm. Does it suck just today? Will it sucking today lead to something positive? And it's the underlying belief that things are going to happen and things are going to work out for a reason. That's how it comes into play. So you might have a really bad day. Something might happen. You have to come to the awareness of why, right? And remember, those negative self-talk statements, they're not personal to us. It could just be something that happened. So it's okay to say, I let myself get caught with that. Mm-hmm. But we're not saying I'm a bad person. I'm a bad fighter. I don't deserve to be here. People think like that. People think like, I don't know if I deserve to be here. That's never going to help you, right? It's never going to help you to think that way of like, man, did I work hard enough? That's more negative. So it's not that negativity in itself is something that never helps, but that kind doesn't. When it's geared towards you, right? Mm-hmm. I suck. I can't do this. What's going on with me? Maybe I should quit. It doesn't help. But when negative things happen, if you have the awareness to reflect on it and learn from it, then it becomes a great thing. And that's how you can develop positive, right? It's this thing. And the way I describe kind of like developing into that and developing that skill, it's like, let's say you go out for a hike, right? You know, when you go on a hike and there's the trail that you follow, it's like, well, why do you follow that trail? Because it's like the flattest part, right? There's a bunch of trees and bushes and stuff. You're not going to walk in there. You follow the path. That's how our brain works. Our neurons follow the path of least resistance. Mm-hmm. It's like most of our body does that. We always follow the path of least resistance. And when we're thinking fast, that's how it goes. Least resistance. We always prioritize that path. So our whole lives, if we're thinking negatively and we're doing those things, that's just the path of least. That's why people can be naturally negative, right? Because that's just how they've always thought. It takes a long time to go the other way. Because now imagine, instead of following that path, you're kind of like, I'm like, go through the other way. Go walk through those bushes. You have to take this sword, you know, like in the movies, and you have to chop it down as you walk. That's what it's like, because your body's not used to it. You have to force yourself to think positively, right? It's easy to think negatively. But over time, you walk that path 1,000 times. Guess what? It's going to get flatter. It's going to get flatter. Eventually, 1,000 times more, that path will actually now be the path of least resistance because you flattened it so much. And that's what self-talk is. That's what positivity is. That's why you see some certain people are just positive all the time. Nothing will bring them down. And you're like, how are you like that? It's because they've created that as their path. That's almost like their default mode. You know what I mean? I'm that way too. The moment something negative happens, I can instantly figure out a way that, you know what? Maybe this led to this, which leads to, I could just like visualize the dominoes falling and going, that's why that had to happen. No problem. You know what I mean? Let's say something goes wrong. No problem. Because I've created this path where positivity is now the path of least resistance. Anyone can do it. It's hard though, because it requires the awareness to do it. It requires the discipline to continue to hold yourself accountable to these negative thoughts. You have to keep practicing. It's not enough to just say, man, I'm frustrated. You have to go, wait a second. I just told myself I'm frustrated. What can I tell myself in return? So it's a slow process until it becomes this natural filter. So it's slow, takes a while, but once you build it, I mean, it becomes like that path of least resistance. And that's what people should strive for.
So I just want to also and that makes complete sense. So my coming from like my more artistic side of how I see things, you know, one of the things that I see a lot of, and I'd like to hear what your thoughts are, is when people start going down this path of like more self-awareness, positivity, you know, we see a lot of that, and that's great. Like, it's an important thing for all of us to do. I mean, we all follow MMA fighters on social media, probably a bunch of them. They all start to look and sound the same. Sometimes, right? And they pull to some quotes, and sometimes you look and you go, are you actually positive? Yeah. Or do you think you have to be positive? Or on top of it, like, you sometimes feel like when people go down a certain path, they lose who they are as a person. And I know that's not what you're advocating, but I'd kind of like to hear your link or your thought. Like, is there false positivity? Like, how do you see those kind of situations?
There's a tricky line when it comes to faking it till you make it, right? That's something that we've heard, whether it's in fighting, show business, whatever. Faking it till you make it. Now, what's that mean? And we were just talking about this before. There's ways to do it properly, and there's ways to not do it properly. So, for example, self-talk is a way that you can kind of fake it till you make it. You tell yourself, I'm the best, right? You tell yourself, I'll fight anybody, right? That's a way to do it. It's another way to physically do it, right? Let's say you're walking. If I tell you to walk to the room, walk to the door and back, and you walk, you're like, okay. And I ask you how you feel. You say, I'll feel normal. But if I say walk to the door and walk back, the way that you would walk into the ring, things change. Chest is out, head's up, you feel a little bit better. And then I ask you, how did that walk feel? Felt better. You didn't really change anything. You just changed your posture. You changed these things. And you kind of faked it, right? Because, and let's say you're not feeling confident. You can fake it, right? Put your chest up, smile, right? And sometimes it does help. And a lot of times it does help, right? If you're really nervous, you're scared, you don't want people to know that, you can fake it, right? You walk in, and just sometimes the act of faking it in itself will make you feel better. I mean, there's a bunch of studies that have been done that show just by smiling, regardless of what mood you're in, it'll make you happier. Why is it? Well, because, when your muscles are, used to smiling, it's always because you're happy. Your brain links smiling to happiness. So if you smile, your brain knows, okay, smiling and happiness are connected. So even if you're feeling pretty neutral and you smile, like a really big smile, you'll feel a little bit happier because your brain connects those two, and they say, well, I'm smiling, I must be happy. So it releases those things. So that's when faking it till you make it does help. When you fake something physically, emotionally, whatever, and you're actually generating the response that you want. It's possible, right? Walking with your chest up, doing those things. It does make you feel better. It makes you feel more confident. Whether you're talking about, it's a different way. Like you said, everybody, I think what matters is what's the intention behind it. Is the intention to genuinely motivate yourself, or is it to sell a fight? I think that's what we find with the social media stuff, right? There's one thing when it comes to telling yourself, I'm the best, right? Even if in the moment, maybe you don't really believe it, it can help with your confidence, right? You look yourself in the mirror and go, I'm the best. I'm the best in my division. I'm the fastest. I'm the strongest. Nobody can take me out. You start your morning like that, you'll feel better. But then we say it online, you do it in interviews, there's a different tone to it. It's like a chip on your shoulder, right? It's to sell the fight. It's to gain momentum. It's to do those things. So it's a tricky side. It depends what the intention is. Is it genuine? Are you saying it because you really believe it, or are you saying it just to sell fights? And like you said, people say, I'll fight anybody, anytime, any place, put me there. And it becomes the same stuff over and over again. It's tough. Do you really believe it? You know what I mean? And what is the intention behind it? Are you trying to sell a fight? Are you trying to make yourself look like this top guy? Or are you just doing it by yourself, right? And I think context matters. And I think that's how to answer the question. It's a tricky thing where both work. Right? There's yes and there's no. Telling yourself I'm the best in the world does help if you really believe it, and if you're really trying to use that as a tool to motivate yourself. But if you're doing it on the other side just to kind of like flex and to like promote yourself and whatever, and you're not doing the work behind the scenes to make that happen, if it's not clicking, right? Like the front end and the back end have to match. Yeah. So if you're telling yourself I'm the best in the world and you're grinding behind the scenes, okay, there's a match there. You know what I mean? You'll get there. But if you're telling the media I'm the best in the world, then you're going to parties and you're doing your thing, like it's not really conducive to a good performance. So context really matters, intent really matters. I think that's just how life is in general. But to answer that question, it is context. Sometimes faking it till you make it is a strong tool, and sometimes it exposes people that are really just not that confident. And I think it's a thin line. Yeah. If that answers the question.
Yeah, I'd say you'd be surprised how many guys are not what they are. They say it. But then you always question it. Are you really like that? Like, do you eat, sleep, breathe like this all the time? Or is this just bullshit? Yeah. And a lot of times you see it in their performance. You see how they handle the losses, for example. So if they lose a fight, you see where that mental toughness really was. How do they handle the loss? How do they pick themselves up from that? Some guys are fucking outstanding at that. Some are terrible, and they are exposed, right? How do you get somebody to the point where they know they need that help? Like, how does you talk to fighters and they say, no, I'm already mentally tough, I don't need to talk to you? How do you break somebody down to a point where, like, hey man, maybe this would work for you in a sense? Like,
yeah, I would say for the most part,
because sorry to interrupt you, but I think almost every fighter should have a psychologist
Yeah.
assess them, talk to them. I think they should have that outlet to blow off. Most of these guys get into combat sports because they have something shitty that happened to them as a kid, whether it's bullying, whether it's bad parenting. Sometimes it's just a competitive family. They want to be competitive. But for the most part, a lot of fighters come from homes that, maybe not so much homes or environments, we'll say, environments that aren't very appealing. That's why they get into fighting. That's why they get into, to blow off that steam, to get off that thing. So how do you look at somebody and say, hey, this will really help you as an individual, not just as a performing athlete? Like,
It actually happens a lot less than you'd expect. I would say, it's a small amount of people that do say that when they say, oh, I'm already tough. Sometimes there's nothing you can do, right? You say, okay, well, you just kind of have to wait. You say, well, okay. Eventually you're going to perform. Maybe you're going to underperform. You're going to realize that could help me. And that's why I always end things on like a really nice note, because I'm not going to burn any bridges. I say, no problem. That's great. Knowing that, something might happen down the line where you come back and you say, okay, you know what? Seems like I do need something. I'm not really in the business of changing people's minds. It takes too much time, right? Especially, and you never want to, especially the work that I do, because it's so intimate. It's like a podcast like this. If people aren't on the same page from jump, there's like this friction there, right? My job isn't to convince you. My job is to help, right? So if I have to sell you first, it's not really the best thing, especially if you're starting the session with this chip on your shoulder of like, let me see what this guy's, you know what I mean? So you're not really going to learn from it. So to answer the question of how do I change them, I really don't, right? It's like if you're selling it, like you talk about being a salesman, if you're selling someone a product and they don't want it, sometimes it's easier just to knock on the next door than to try to convince that person. Because the time it takes you to convince that person, if they're still going to say no, you just waste your opportunity on all these other houses. The day's done. So I don't really do it too much. What I do sometimes is I have a really good relationship with a lot of sports agents. I can talk to them and we kind of use them as like an intermediary, right? So instead of going from me to the athlete, talk to the agent. And they say, okay, here's what I do, blah, blah, blah. And they say, okay, well, here are a few guys that we know. Why don't we talk to them? And sometimes hearing it from their agent is a little bit better because their agent knows them, or they feel like their agent knows them and they know it's not coming from a place of weakness. It's coming from a place of help. So, okay, my agent recommended it. Could be work. So that's one way. But yeah, and I think people like that too, I'll say, well, let's do one for free. Let's have a session. If you get value from it, let's keep the conversation going. If you don't, no problem. Because I really do, like I said before, I believe in the system. I believe it works, which is why when it came to my first couple clients, I did like 6 full weeks. No problem. At the end of the day, if you feel like you're not gaining from it, it's completely on you. No problem. I'll look at that and I'll say what went wrong, right? But it's always on me, 100%. I never blame anybody else. It's always on me. If it didn't work out for them, I never say like, well, they didn't try hard enough. They didn't commit to the program. It's always me. Why? Even if they didn't, even if they never journaled once, why couldn't I get them to do that? What did I do wrong? Why wasn't I convincing enough? You know what I mean? Could I have said it a different way? It's always on me. It's never on them. So that's, another way too. Sometimes I'll go to the agents and talk to them that way. Sometimes I'll just say, listen, let's do a couple sessions for free. Tell them what you think. If you like it, let's keep it up. If not, no problem. And 9 times out of 10, they say, you know what? Like, wow, even the first session alone, we'll go through some goal setting stuff. We'll do the baseline assessment. And I love it. There's always that moment in the first couple of sessions where you see them light up like, wow. It's like, fuck, I never thought about it that way. And that's what gets me. That's what like makes me feel alive, saying something to someone and then looking at me and going like, wow, like I never thought about things that way. I'm like, let's do it. Like now that's how the relationship gets building. Now we've established that trust. You trust me, you know my abilities, right? Because I mean, look at me, I'm this young guy. You know what I mean? I don't look like other people that do this type of thing. It's really easy to be doubtful. Let's see what this guy's all about. No problem. I welcome it. And then that's when when that trust is established, it's stronger than any other relationship because I'm not this 58-year-old PhD guy that's been studying this all my life. And, but the difference is I've walked in that ring the same way you have. I've walked in the ring. I've had all the fans from another country booing against me. I've been in countries where I couldn't speak the language. I didn't know what the food was like. I've been there. And once we've established that connection and that trust, it just helps even more. Because now they can see me as more of like a teammate or a coach instead of like this psychologist, doctor, you know what I mean? Because I'm not a psychologist. So I don't pretend either. I don't pretend to be something that I'm not. It comes down to authenticity, right? It's this trust. And if you break the trust, there's nothing. So it comes to, all right, let's get together. Let's try this out. See what you think. And then, like I said, once the trust is established, because I can connect to them on a level that academics can't really do, now we're in. Now I can say, hey, you know how you get those butterflies when you're walking in, you can hear the crowd and your song plays. These are things I can connect to and we can attack. But if you've only read about it, there's only so much you can do, right? If you read 1,000 podcast books and then you record your first podcast, maybe you'd have like a little bit of an edge. But then I'm always going to take the person that's recorded 10,000 episodes over someone that's just read about it a bunch of times.
For sure.
Experience,
Yeah.
right? Experience. Now, it's not like that in all fields. You know what I mean? If I'm going to go to the doctor's office, I want someone that fucking knows what they're doing. But there's ways to do it. And it's not like I've given up. I'm still in school. I'm still pursuing the academic side. But like I said, I have the sport experience. I have the intuition. I'm pursuing the academic side. And when it comes together, it's a great thing.
How long is a treatment? Not a treatment, we'll call it. How long would someone be committed with you?
Consistent, as long as they want, on a month-to-month. So I do it differently than everybody else. Like I said, psychologists charge a lot of money. And it's the wrong demographic. You know this. You're not going to go to an MMA fighter and ask them for, $120 an hour, $150 an hour. You can't afford it. All their money is going into the training, to the flying out. It's the wrong demographic to try to be barking up that tree. So that's why I cut it way down, but we keep it consistent. So like I said, every week, every 2 weeks, every month, I would say most people are on like a bi-weekly program. And it's just like a subscription. It just charges their card every month. We do our 2 sessions, we schedule it in, and then we go from there. If there's a fight camp, sometimes we'll ramp it up. If there's some downtime, we'll tone it down. It's completely like when I say it's personalized, not only is the treatment, like the session's personalized, but the whole platform is personalized for them. Right? They have a fight camp, they want to do an extra session, no problem, we'll do it. Right? You're going on vacation, no problem. We just won't charge you. It's really easy, really simple, but it's consistent. The same way that you always have your coach. Doesn't matter if you're in a fight camp or not, you're always training. You always have your coach, right? Whether you have a dietitian, 2 other things, like there's always people in your camp. That's how I feel. I want to be a part of your camp. I want to be in your corner for real. I don't want to just be this guy that you call up every 4 months when you have a fight. I want to be a part of this. You know what I mean? I want to be a part of this crew. I want to be a part of your training team. I want to be part of your team. That's how it works. And I learned that from myself, understanding, well, what do I want when I was fighting? Because I saw sports psychologists, I saw therapists, I saw everybody. Not because there was something wrong with me, but because I always wanted the edge. I always wanted to be better than my opponent in any way that I could, have all my bases covered. Yeah. And that's where most athletes that do this come from. They want their bases covered. So that's what I did. And I thought, when I was the athlete sitting in the chair talking to the guy, thinking like, well, how would I do this? Right? And that's something that I always did. Like, how would I do this and how would I do it better? Sometimes like they'd be talking to me and I'd just be thinking like, how would I be doing this differently? And that's one of the things that I do. I keep it consistent all the time. Another thing that I do is I'll actually evaluate them in person. You know what I mean? Like you never expect that. You never go to a sports psychologist and, have them come watch you train. It just doesn't happen. It's selfish. But I knew that would really help me. So that's what I do. That's why I flew down last January to Miami. I went to American Top Team, talked to all the guys. I went to, like I told you, I went to Milwaukee, watched a couple of them fight, like watch them train, watch them compete. Like it's one thing to just talk over Skype, over FaceTime, but it's another to be there and to show like, I'm here for you for real, like for real, not just because it's easier. It's, you know what I mean? I'm here and I'm there and I understand what it's like to be an athlete. And these are like my people. That's what I feel. When I look at athletes and I look at fighters, like that's my people. And I feel comfortable around them. I think in turn, they feel comfortable around me and it creates a really nice dynamic that I don't think I would have been able to establish if I was just an academic. Yeah. You know what I mean?
So can you get a percentage of people's profits on fights as well? Because like, is there like because you're part of the camp, like they often do 10% for coaches, like, are you in that as well? Or when you say subscription, it is just the subscription? Because it sounds like you're putting so much time into it. For sure. How do you make sure that it's sustainable for yourself as well,
Yeah, it's not a equity thing. It's just a monthly cost like anything else. It's a subscription. So you can pay, I think it's like for some of it, let's say like, let's round it out to like $100 a month, let's just say, right? Everybody's different. It's just like that. You just put your card in. I use like Square because you can't do e-transfers like in the States. I learned that early on.
Yeah, I had that problem.
Right? So you just do it every month and then every month it just auto bills them and then we just run our 2 sessions, try to keep it organized. I try to stay on top of them and make sure that they're keeping up with the sessions, right? I could be an asshole and say, oh, you didn't book me, you know what I mean? Like it is what it is, but it matters to me that it's authentic and that it comes from the right place. So I'll check in on them. Hey man, it's coming up in a few weeks. Like let's schedule a session. I'll do it all the time. So that's what it is. Not to say that I would never take that approach. I'm still learning about the ways to do it financially. Yeah. But for me, I always want to protect my relationship with the athlete. I never want to do anything that would make them feel uncomfortable from that side. And it's tricky. I mean, listen, it'd be easy if I had a finance team or I had like a secretary that could do that for me. Yeah. But when you're the like the administrator of the program, right? When I'm the guy that does it, I'm the main guy. If I have to be the guy that also like is the bill collector, there's friction there.
Yeah.
Friction there. So I would always 10 out of 10, 10 days out of 10, I will always choose the program provider side, Dylan, over the bill collector, Dylan. Yeah. Because one of them builds a relationship, one of them hurts it. And the moment you kind of plant that seed that like this isn't a completely authentic relationship, goes downhill. Mm-hmm. So not to say I would never take the approach of going equity side, especially if I have people that I'm going to be with like 24/7. Yeah. But for now, it's just it's simple as subscription based. People have 1 million subscriptions. It's easy for them. They don't have to necessarily worry about it all the time, and then they get to know. Mm-hmm. Okay, no, but the same way that you pay for your gym membership, right? So you can pay $200 for this, $100 for this, $1,000 for this. It's just another subscription, and then you just give me a heads up, and you say, you know what, I'm good for next month. Don't worry about it. Okay, cool. That's really it.
Amazing.
That's one of those things that Jamie and I talk about a lot. So we talk a lot about, MMA fighters, right? And especially when they're in the, let's say, entry-level pros, not UFC or at the top of their game, but maybe they're making 1-1. They win, they get $1,000, and then, they get their $1,000 base. And I remember I was talking with Jamie, I was like, one of the challenges is you're not going to live off that. So these people do have day jobs or whatever, right? And I guess the point we're trying to talk to, like when we talk to Phenom Performance, he said, Dr. Callum, he said, when you're spending money on his service, you're investing in your your ability to win more and make more money down the road, right? So you're not going to make much off 1,000 over 3 months. You can't survive off that. So, he's like, you use part of that, will help you get more wins, be higher performance. And I kind of feel like that's something very similar with you, right? If somebody's using your service, they're investing in being able to perform better. It's not always going to, like you said, you're not always going to necessarily win everything, but you're unlocking higher potential, i.e. more revenue for yourself.
Yeah, I've definitely thought about it. I've definitely thought about it, taking some sort of equity approach. Just about breaking it down. Any time you look into the equity side, you have to make sure that your relationships with the agents are amazing, because the agents are really the ones that own the equity. You know what I mean? They're the ones that can say, wait a second, this doesn't sound right. We're taking a certain percent. Yeah. So that's why I always try to establish strong relationships with everybody, whether it's their coaches, their agents, the organization. Like, I'll talk to everybody. I'll make sure that everybody knows my name. Everybody likes me. I've had a phone call with everybody that I can. That way, when it comes time to talking business, we've already established that like there's no hostility here, right? It's easy. This is an industry where it's easy to get fooled, right? Because it's not something that's necessarily been proven, right? It's not like massage therapists or physio people or nutritionists, dietitians, where you can say, listen, the science has been there. Every team has a dietitian, blah, blah, blah. It's easy to get scammed, right? There's people that can say that they're doing this and they're helping athletes, and they're not. Yeah. They're just talking. They're just like asking questions and then calling it a day. They're not actually contributing. That's why there's sometimes a lot of winning people over. And I like doing that. Like you said, I have no problem talking people through it. Understanding that the relationship, that like the way that your perception of me ultimately is your perception of my company. And I'm okay with that because I know who I am, right? I know what I bring to the table. But that's why I'm also okay with doing things for free. So I'm like, listen, no problem. It hasn't been proven. You have your doubts. Let's get rid of those doubts. You tell me what you need. Let's do it for free for X amount of time. Maybe you put up a banner for me, something to say thank you, put the logo on the shorts. It is what it is. Then we'll talk money. Yeah. But I'm never going to come in and say, you've never heard about this. You should be paying. Yeah. Right? So it's like, I'm always okay to go the other way and say, no problem. Let me prove it to you.
And that's what I liked about you. That's what I liked about you when we first talked too, because it wasn't like a hey, pay me. It was like hey man, let's look at it and see if it's even works. If it works, then let's talk money later. You know what I mean? Like sometimes when people do that, you look at them and go, okay, because sometimes it's not always about dollars and cents. It's about relationships and proving to each other what you can do, right? How does somebody find you, bro? If someone wanted to reach out and get a hold of you and get these kind of services into, like, how do they find you? Obviously, you can message me, and I can link the two of you. But how does somebody jump in and find you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always on my phone. You can check it out. You can. So the company page is MindLock. It's just at MindLock with an underscore at the end. Okay. You can check it out there. You can DM me from there. I'll respond. I'll see it. You can see some of the athletes that we work with. You can see I've done some podcasts like this. I have my own podcast I just started called Locked In with Dylan, where I'll talk with athletes and coaches and all that.
Okay, wicked.
You can see me there, or you can find my personal Instagram is just Dylan Nadler with an underscore at the end. Also, I'll be there too. Like I'm always around. You can send me a message. I'll respond right away. And yeah, like I said, I mean, kind of hinting back to the podcast. the conversations that I have, I mean, like conversations are gold, right? And I mean, like conversations that I have with these athletes, there's so many times where I'm talking to them and I'm like, man, like other people need to hear this, but you can't expose it because it's like a private thing.
Yeah.
So putting it under the context of a podcast, and now sometimes having the same people on or new people, you get to have those same conversations, but now there's like a lot of people that can listen and watch and learn. So that's one of the reasons why I started doing that. Because I'm like, man, there's so many conversations I'm having that are amazing. Like you said, when the microphones are off, some of the best conversations are there.
100%,
Especially when the context of the conversation is development, challenges, adversity. Things like you said, athletes don't really want to share. People always want to do the hoorah thing, right? I'm the best, nothing scares me. Being vulnerable is sometimes the way to gain fans, right?
Sure.
People understand, wait a second, he gets scared, I get scared with the same person, blah, blah, blah. So having those same conversations under the context of a podcast, I'm like, you know what, this could be a good idea to kind of get these thoughts out there. So that's where you can find me, Instagram, YouTube, everywhere. It's just MindLock Mental Training, and then Dylan Nadler with an underscore. I'm always around, man.
Beautiful. Amazing. Okay. Thank you again, man. I appreciate it. Let's wrap this up and have a great New Year.
Yeah,
Merry Christmas,
thank you, man.
the whole
I appreciate
shebang,
it.
and,
I appreciate it.
Thanks for coming on, man. I truly appreciate it.
Of course, man. Anytime.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, Dylan Nadler. Want to give a shout out to Devolution Productions. Devolution Productions is the production company I use to produce my podcast and to do a lot of my fight-related stuff. The absolute best production company I've had the opportunity to work with. And if you're looking to get any work done or any kind of videos or anything professional, Devolution Productions is the company to contact. To get a hold of them, just inbox me, shoot me a message, text me, call me, Facebook, Instagram, anywhere, any of those handles, and I'll connect you in a heartbeat. Devolution Productions is, bar none, the best production company in Canada.